Alright, so at long last, Shara Magomedov has been fraud-checked after losing against Michael Venom Page this past weekend at UFC Saudi Arabia. And even though I think that a lot of UFC fans have started using the term fraud-check in situations that don't necessarily justify it, I really think that in the case of Shara, this guy has been a fraud-check waiting to happen ever since his UFC debut. And frankly, I'm not gonna lie, I'm pretty happy that the world finally saw what I always knew was the case, which is when Shara Bullet gets put in front of legitimate competition, he is going to be exposed as a can crusher of the highest order. Okay, let's talk about the fight really quickly. Personally, I scored at 30-27 in favor of MVP, much like two of the three judges, but I understand why some people gave the third round to Magomedov based on him landing more strikes in that round. That said, this did not seem like it was a very difficult fight for MVP, and it never felt like he needed to even get out of first gear in order to cruise to the win. Both the first and the second rounds were undeniably MVP's rounds. He outstruck Shara on all fronts, and he was landing his signature right-hand blitz early and often, much like when he beat Kevin Holland last year. One of the craziest stats from this fight is that throughout the first two rounds, Shara didn't land a single shot to the head on MVP. I will repeat this, in over 10 minutes of fighting, Shara couldn't find a single strike to the head, and this is pretty indicative of one of the biggest points that I want to call out here. Shara's boxing is pretty damn bad. And of course, this is Shara Bullet that we're talking about. The guy has a very kick-heavy offense, and to his credit, he was landing a lot of good leg kicks on MVP throughout the first two rounds. And to be fair to Shara, it is very hard to catch MVP to the head, and based on the stance that MVP fights in, it does make sense to target his legs in order to limit his movement. However, in spite of those details, it's not like Shara wasn't trying to land strikes to the head. The guy was throwing punches, elbows, and head kicks targeted to MVP's dome, and he landed at a 0% accuracy over the first 10 minutes of the fight. Anyways, third round starts in a fight that's pretty clearly 2-0 MVP, and even though Shara definitely fought with more urgency and even outlanded MVP in this round, call me crazy, but I still think I gave it to Page. Now, this one was close, but I still feel like Michael was able to land the bigger shots to Shara's head and body, whereas most of Shara's strikes landed were the leg kicks. MVP even started slowing down a bit in this round, and he was still able to outmaneuver Shara almost every step of the way. Honestly, the biggest moment in this round for Shara was ending the fight on top in MVP's guard, and that's only because Michael fell down while throwing a spinning heel kick, which he then cracked Shara in the face with a hard up kick. Look, man, some of you guys are going to be typing in the comments that I'm just a Dagestani hater and blah blah blah, but that's really not the case. I enjoyed watching Khabib fight for the most part. I think that Islam is fun to watch, Umar is a very skilled and well-rounded fighter, and obviously Shamil Gaziev is the greatest fighter who's ever lived. And I know that there are a lot of fans out there that criticize the UFC's supposed Dagestani bias, but at the end of the day, if the fighters are skilled and entertaining enough to belong in the UFC, I really don't care what area of the world they come from. But in the case of Shara Bullet, I just don't think he's all that good based on the eye test alone. And we might not see eye to eye on this, but it annoys me that the UFC has clearly given him favorable matchups throughout his entire UFC career and have been pushing this guy to be the next big thing, even though he's only beaten up tomato cans to get to this point. And this might just be one of my famous unsubstantiated conspiracy theories, but I kinda get the feeling that Dana and Hunter were trying to set up Shara to win against a big name in MVP, seeing as this fight took place at middleweight and MVP hasn't fought at middleweight since 2013. They wanted MVP to lose so that they could push their fraudulent prospect even higher up the rankings and turn him into a bigger star, but you know what, Dana, your plan fucking backfired. Now, some of you might be saying that Shara losing isn't actually a fraud check for whatever reasons you want to defend him with, but my primary counter to whatever you say is just take a look at this guy's opponents throughout his UFC career. Shara made his UFC debut against Bruno Silva in October 2023. Bruno is currently 4-6 in the UFC, and since 2022, he has a dismal record of 1-6. Then last June, he beat Antonio Trocoli, who is just not a good fighter, and you can clearly see that by just watching the guy fight. Regardless, Antonio is 0-2 in the UFC after losing both of his fights in 2024. After that, Shara defeated Mikhail Oleksiejczuk, who was 0-2 heading into the fight, and after losing to Shara, went 0-3 throughout the entire 2024 calendar year. Then in Shara's final fight of 2024, he beat Armen Petrosyan, who was coming off of a loss to Rodolfo Vieira earlier that year. That double spinning back fist KO was pretty fucking sick though, not gonna lie. And even in the case of this fight against MVP, Page was coming off of a loss to Ian Gary, and he's a career welterweight who moved up to middleweight, and the guy is 37 years old. Do you guys see the picture that I'm trying to paint? The UFC has repeatedly given Shara very blatant favorable matchups where every single one of his opponents was coming off of a loss, with the exception of Antonio Trocoli, who was a last-minute replacement. And if we're taking a look at who Shara fought in 2024 with Trocoli, Oleksiejczuk, and Petrosyan, all three of those guys went a combined 0-7 last year. And if we zoom out a little bit more, taking a look at all of Shara's UFC opponents, in 2024 they went a combined 1-10, with MVP being the only fighter to win a single single fight in 2024. That is absolutely crazy, and I don't know if Dana and Hunter Campbell genuinely thought that Shara was a legitimate contender, or if they just think he's super marketable because the guy looks like a pirate or whatever, but the fact that they have this guy ranked 14th at middleweight is just genuinely laughable. And lo and behold, the first time that they have Shara fight against a competent striker, he gets styled on. Look man, if this is not the definition of an actual fraud check, then I don't know what is. Shara's been fed fighters on the decline or just straight up canned since he entered the UFC. He was fast-tracked to getting ranked in his division, even though I'm 100% confident that unranked RoboCop Rodriguez would smoke him if they fought, and he's been getting pushed harder by the UFC marketing machine than Jack Della Maddalena ever has, and that guy is sniffing a title shot. And for all you guys that are saying that I'm hating on the guy, it's not him personally that I hate, it's really not. What I do hate, however, is that every so often there's a new batch of fighters that get fast-tracked to prominence, even though it's pretty obvious that it's unwarranted. We've seen it with Sage Northcutt, Paige Van Zandt, and Molly McCann, just to name a few. And all while this is happening, you have legitimately good fighters in the promotion that get no promotion from the UFC and are barely scraping by just to survive, just because they don't fit the seemingly arbitrary criteria of what makes a fighter marketable. And before you guys start typing it in the comments, yes, I have seen the videos of Shara getting into altercations with people outside of the UFC. There's of course the very famous video of Shara getting into a brawl in a Dagestani mall over a guy kissing his girlfriend in public. I can't show this video in its entirety because it's definitely going to get flagged by YouTube, but basically Shara sees this random guy do a little PDA to his girlfriend, which from what I understand is a big no-no in that part of the world. Magomed gets up in this dude's face, a fight breaks out, and then the crowd ends up separating them. Then additional footage shows Magomedov waiting for the same guy around a corner, and once the guy walks around, Shara punches him to the ground and then stomps on the guy's head even though he's clearly already unconscious. Can somebody say anger issues? Anyways, if you want to see this video in its entirety, I'll have a link to it in the description. Then there's this other incident when at a BJJ tournament, Shara gets submitted and kicks his opponent.
Going for a leg, going for a leg, going for a leg, going for a... Oh! A bit of a confrontation going on over there.
Obviously, this one's not as bad as the mall fight video, but I thought it was worth pointing out. I'll let you guys form your own opinions of the guy based on those videos, but at least in the context of this video, I won't spend too much time talking about this guy's very obvious anger issues. With all this being said, Shara Bullet was a walking fraud check waiting to happen, and even though I try not to celebrate fighters losing, I can't help but feel a sense of balance in the universe now that Shara's paper-thin undefeated UFC run has come to an end. And even though the guy was clearly not the level of fighter that the UFC tried to paint him as, I do genuinely hope that he takes this loss as a big learning lesson and adds the necessary wrinkles to his game in order to improve. Because in an ideal world, if Shara can actually become the top tier striker that the UFC marketed him as, I'll be happy to look past him being undeservedly propped up by the promotion. Yes, he got fraud checked in this fight, but that doesn't mean he can't become a legitimate fighter and contender in the future. Only time will tell. Anyways, that's the video for today. Definitely let me know what you think about Shara Bullet's loss against MVP. Do you think that he was fraud checked, and where do you think he goes from here? As always, if you like the video, then like the video, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do so. I appreciate you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.